Okay, confession time here. Let's just take a quick survey. How many of you have ever run out of gas in your car before when you've been driving? Raise your hand. Oh, good. I'm not alone. Okay. You sure? I want to blame mine on a bad fuel sensor in my SUV. And it's really true. I was driving once and the gas light wasn't even on. And, the low gas warning, it didn't even come on, and all of a sudden, boom. And when my SUV runs out of gas, it's over. There's no starting it to get a little bit further. You are where you are. And that's okay some places. It's not okay when you're just about ready to pull you're in front of about 20 cars pulling into the car wash. And your car runs out of gas. That's a good day. It's a good day because all these people are going, what are you doing? So, all that. What do you do when you're about to run out? Now, you should prepare and plan ahead, obviously, get to the gas station. I don't know if you've ever run out of water. Sometimes I know people have different water line issues, and I heard of a guy that, he kept running out of water. His water line was breaking, and his friend just sent him a note in the mail to give him some condolence. He says, just get well soon. That's all he said. Just let that sink in for a minute. I remember one time I was traveling, coming back from Charlotte, North Carolina to Grand Rapids, and I had a long week. It was long days, and this is a few years ago. It was the weekend of the Super Bowl. And it was memorable because that morning when I was flying home, actually it was an unusual trip because I flew part of the way and then I drove part of the way. So when I went to North Carolina, I drove to a certain town that I'll mention in a minute, and then I flew the rest of the way. So I got to the airport, Super Bowl weekend. It's Friday morning. It's early. I get there, and I found that once I got to the airport, everything was rerouted. And, it happens. I thought, okay, maybe this is an opportunity. I was trying to be optimistic. And so I'm sitting in the little cafe and ended up having a conversation with another guy who was a dad. We ended up talking about being fathers to daughters. And then we turned the conversation to faith and had this wonderful conversation. I thought, okay, that's it. That was the reason it all happened. And so I was like, okay, God, I'm just ready to shut down and kind of finish the rest of the day. I get rerouted through a different city. I ended up going through New York City. And that was where the Super Bowl was being hosted that weekend. So I want you to just imagine what the airport was like on Friday of Super Bowl weekend. It was like nuts. And I'm trying to navigate and get through it, and I'm getting delayed. I'm sitting at the gate. Ended up having another conversation with a guy, and we started talking, and all of a sudden, we turned the conversation to faith. And there's like 12 or 15 people I noticed eavesdropping at the gate as we're talking about Jesus right there at the gate. So I thought, okay, that's good. I'm ready to shut down. I'm done for the day, God. That's it. That's all I got. I was like, this is the end. My energy is out. I land in this certain town, and I'm almost afraid to mention it, but I will. Columbus, Ohio. You ever heard of it? I land in Columbus. So great things are going to happen when you land in Columbus and you're from Michigan. And it's early evening, and because it's January, the sun's setting earlier, and so it's right at dusk, and I'm driving, and it's just wall-to-wall traffic on a Friday night, and all of a sudden my car starts to overheat. You notice a pattern here, some car issues. So it was one of those things where when your car reads, you just got to pull right over. So I pulled over to the nearest exit I could. I went into this random restaurant, and I started eating, and someone walks up to me and says, "Hey, are you Geoff Eckart?" And my first response when I hear that is, now, do I owe you money? He said no. So I said, yes, that's me. And we started talking, and he ended up being a student years ago that went to one of our camps, to NTS, and he had strayed from God. We had this wonderful conversation. And I thought, okay, God, that's great, but I'm done. This is it. I got no more left. This is it. Come on. Been stranded in Columbus, Ohio. All the garages were closed for the weekend. I thought, I'm going to be stuck here for Super Bowl weekend in Columbus, Ohio, of all places. Well, I'm not a great mechanic, but I know that when I opened the hood, I just hope there's a big on-off switch there, and there wasn't. So I didn't know what to do other than put some extra antifreeze in the radiator, and then I grabbed an extra one just in case, and I thought, I'm just going to get home. So I jumped in the car. Now it's dark, and I start driving, and everything's good, and I get about 45 minutes down the road, and then I see a car stranded on the side of the road, and I thought, man, that's terrible to be those guys. And I felt the Lord just whisper how he does. And he said, you going to really let those guys go? And I thought, Lord, I am done. I got no more left. I'm so tired. I want to get home. And so I turned around, and I said to these guys, what's going on? And they said, well, our car's overheating, and we need some radiator fluid. I said, well, you're not going to believe this, but I happen to have some in the back. And ended up having a conversation with this man named Josh. I said, hey, do you guys want to ride up to the next exit so you can stay where it's warm? They had someone come to pick him up. One guy took me up on the offer, Josh. We got in the car, and I said, Josh, tell me your story, man. Like, this isn't a random occurrence. Like I said, I've had a crazy day, but just tell me about where you're coming from. And he goes, well, just had a rough streak lately. My girlfriend just broke up with me. I just moved out. I lost my job, and all my pigs died. I'm like, oh, your pigs died. And I said, you know that your story here sounds like a really good country song, by the way. But he had invested in all these pigs, and they got a disease. This was going to be how he was going to make a living, and they all died. And so he lost all of his investment. But we ended up having this amazing conversation about faith. And I look back, and I was just not prepared for that. I was not prepared. I was like, okay, this is it, and this is it. And we get to those points in our life where we think, God, this is all I can take. This is it. I just want to move on. I want to forget it. I just want to shut down. And the thing that we are going to talk about today is that when you come to the end of yourself, there's the opportunity to get to the beginning of something that's way beyond what you and I could experience alone in this world. We end the natural, and we can walk into the supernatural. And we're going to talk about that today. And I want to mention again, I know that our host did a great job, but I brought these up. Our growth guides, these are incredible. And I want you to know that from last year to this year, the sales for these, you guys picking these up, is up 57% from what it was last year. More people getting into the Bible on a daily basis, which I'm so excited about. So again, it's not too late. You're at a great time. If you haven't gotten one of these yet, for your kids, for yourself, for your students, make sure you do that. It's such a great opportunity. This week I had a great privilege of, my wife and I took a quick trip. We're part of the National Day of Prayer on the board. And I was able to share with 160 leaders from around the country that mobilize unified public prayer for America. And they do it throughout the year, but they culminate on the National Day of Prayer, which is the first Thursday of May. You're going to see just some pictures and a video here of just what it looked like. But these 160 people gathered together represent every state in America, all the state, regional, and many local coordinators. And these people, just to give you an idea of what's in this room, they mobilize over 75,000 public prayer gatherings every May for America. That's amazing. So it was an honor to be there and to be able to encourage them and share with them. And I want to remind you of a couple things before we talk about what we're going to talk about today is that, there's something happening really unique in our country right now. Across college campuses, there are droves of young people that are getting baptized, that are going to all-night worship and prayer events that are happening, not just in our smaller, maybe what you might consider the obvious, like a Christian university, but public universities, the big major ones in the north, south, east, and west, everywhere. That there's something happening, and there's something happening in churches. I'm hearing it, and next week is the Global Day of Prayer. And a lot of people wouldn't know this, but there will be a gathering next week. It starts early on Sunday morning, our time, and people from all over the world will be joined together online all at one time from all the different time zones. I think every time zone is represented. And we will be praying for our world, but specifically this year, the whole world has decided to pray for us as a country. Because they see what's happening, they see the struggles that we're facing. And I think you would agree with me in saying that we need this. So I'm encouraged next week as there'll be thousands and thousands and thousands of people from across the world praying for America. And I'm so grateful for that. You know, we're not a perfect nation, but God has really blessed us, and we're meant to be a blessing to the world. So in John chapter 2, this is the beginning of Jesus' story. This is before his public ministry, and anyone that really was outside of his neighborhood didn't really know anything about Jesus. And here's what we find in John 2. It says, on the third day, and the third day meaning just a few days earlier, he had met his disciples, and you see that earlier if you're reading John, but it says on the third day, a wedding took place in Cana in Galilee, and Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. And when the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. Woman, why do you involve me? Jesus replied, my hour is not yet come. And his mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. So nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. And Jesus said to his servants, fill the jars with water. So they filled them to the brim. And he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. And they did so. And the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. And then he called the bridegroom aside and said, everyone brings out the choice wine first, and the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best until now. What Jesus did in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. This was before his ministry, before his teachings, before he was really on the public platform. Jesus here is just simply there with his mother and his disciples, and they get invited to this wedding. And weddings in this part of the country, in Palestine and Galilee where they were, this was a multi-day event. Just so you understand that typically people would get married on a Wednesday, and then when evening came, they would take the bride and groom and they would walk them through the town or village in which they lived, and people would bring out torches and stand by their doorways, and they would greet this couple as they began their journey together as husband and wife. And it was this joyous celebration. There was music and there was food. And it went on multiple days. Instead of going away from their honeymoon, they went to their own home, and they would dress them like royalty, do whatever they say. So this was a big deal for this couple. And here we find Jesus in the midst of all of it. And I want to point out something obvious, but I think that it's so interesting to me, is that Jesus went to a party. Jesus was there at a party. And, you know, a lot of times we look at God, and our whole view of God is based on fear. It's based on condemnation. It's based on judgment. And we think, does God really ever have fun? And what we see in the window here that we find in the Bible that gives us a picture of God in human form is that Jesus is there at a party with all of his neighbors and friends and family. He's there having fun. He's enjoying it. And you know, it's okay to have fun. I want to just point out that if you're a follower of Jesus, there's a lot of people that will look at you and say, well, if you're a Christian, that means that you can't do this, and you can't do this, and you can't do that, and you can't do this, and you can't do that. And that's all they think about, and that's all they focus on. And for many, that's the barrier that keeps them from coming to Jesus is, well, I just don't want to be involved in that, because every Christian I know really isn't a person that's really fun to be around. And that's kind of sad to say, but we shouldn't be like that. We should be people that love to have fun. I think we serve a God that understands a great party and knows how to have fun. And in this situation, he did something miraculous, and his first miracle was revealed at a party. And I wonder what the rest of the world would think if they were around you and your life could just be kind of summarized in a statement. Like, for example, this right here. How many of you would know someone that says, it's okay to laugh in church? That you can do that. You know, that's one of the things I love about Daybreak, is that we're a church that knows how to have fun. You know, I realized before I came to Daybreak, and Ariana have talked about this quite a bit, is that most churches that we've been a part of have been pretty serious. And it's okay to be serious. It's okay to be intense, but it's also really good to have fun, isn't it? Okay, some of you get this and some of you won't. Okay. I might get in trouble for this, but have you ever met anybody that has what you might call resting church face? Do you know what that means? Okay. Don't let that be you, okay? How about a message like this? How about showing the world that we're real people that follow Jesus? That we're not just religious. Because for a lot of people, religious has a lot of bad baggage with it, doesn't it? That we could be more real than we could be religious. I wonder if you as a believer, people might be getting this message from you. That you're looking at some of your friends doing all the things that you wish you could do, and you're thinking, I wish I could have the fun that you're having. You know, we look at what the world offers sometimes, and we forget that what we have is so much greater and deeper and richer and more beautiful. It's not easier sometimes. But those of you that have been on both sides of the equation, having become a follower of Jesus, you know what I'm talking about. How about this message? That loving people is more important than trying to fix them, isn't it? That we're meant to love people. That people are not our projects. That we're praying for people that we know, but it's important that they see that we love them. How about this message? You don't have to be perfect to be loved by God. Isn't that great? And because God loves imperfect people. About this one. Messy people equal Jesus' favorites. Our life can be messy, can't it? It's not perfect. Boy, it looks good on social media, doesn't it? All of our lives look so good. The smile's perfect. Our family's perfect. Our life is perfect. But maybe we're just a little bit more messy than we'd want to admit. One more. I love this one. The joy is greater than judgment. Aren't you glad for that? You know, if we're followers of Jesus, we need to follow in his footsteps and understand that Jesus, his presence at a party says so much to us that our lives can be invitations to other people with the message that we're sending out at work. If you're at work, what message are you sending to your coworkers? I'm busy. I'm stressed. I'm doing the least amount I can. I want to get home as quick as I can. Or are you taking the time to love and listen? Students, when you're at school, same thing. Are you just kind of putting your head down, focused on your own little world? Are you thinking about the world around you, about students, your classmates, people that you know? Are you looking behind their eyes into their soul to see the need that they have for Christ in their life? Our neighbors, our friends, our family. But Jesus was at a party. And then Jesus became aware of this situation because he was invited into the problem. So Jesus is at this party, and everything seems to be going well, and then all of a sudden Jesus gets invited into this problem through his mother. Jesus was standing there just having a great time, and Mary comes and says, hey, they ran out of wine. Now, when you read this in the English, it's kind of hard to understand the nuance, because what we read in today in this translation, it says, Woman, why do you involve me? Now, you could say that a lot of different ways. Woman? I don't think that's the way Jesus talked to his mom, okay? It's hard to translate, but there's a conversation happening here where he uses this term of endearment. I don't know how you might exactly say it in English, but it would be something like, oh, my dear mother, why, this has nothing to do with me, why are you bringing me into this? But she says, listen, you need to do this. And we can read a lot between the lines here in this conversation, but Jesus is like, hey, my ministry's not yet, it's not at the point of time. It's not yet happening. But like a mother, Mary turns and says, hey, go find that guy over there and just do whatever he tells you to do. And so they did. So they went and they found Jesus, and Jesus gives them this instruction. Now, what Jesus did was he wasn't creating a bunch of alcohol to get people drunk, by the way. This was a common thing in that time. This was a diluted mixture of water and wine that was kind of a daily staple for these people because of the uncleanness of the water, the drinking water. This is what they did, and it somehow sanitized it. But Jesus here provided something very special. Because the problem was, there was a great looming embarrassment for this family that was throwing this party. Now, we've thrown 2 parties for our girls. We've had 2 of our girls get married, and because they got married 5 months apart, we told our youngest daughter, you're on lockdown for like 10 years. We got to save up again. Having 2 weddings back to back within 5 months was pretty intense financially because we paid for those parties. I don't know what the background was of these particular parties, but the problem was this was going to cause great embarrassment for this family. Mary knew it, and we know from the context that because Mary was there, Jesus was there, all the disciples were there, it was probably one of those situations where it was either a close friend or maybe even a family member that was being married. And so there's some relationships, and there's some networks, and there's some layers to the story, but here they were. And Jesus says, I'm not really ready for this. But sometimes when we have problems, it's easy for us to kind of ignore Jesus being right there in the room with us. Now, whether you follow Jesus or not yet, here's the thing. You can always invite Jesus into the problem. You can always invite Jesus into the situation that you're facing because it's not a matter of if, but when, right? It reminds me of some friends of ours, this young couple, they just bought their first brand new house, and they were so excited about it, and it still smelled new, and they had all these nice fixtures there, and they had light-colored carpet, and they had pets there, 2 cats and a dog, and they came home one day, and they realized that their dog, named Cooper, he decided to leave something on the carpet before they got on their brand new carpet. And maybe it was because he was old, or maybe it was because he was a little disoriented from being in a new environment, or maybe it was a combination of things, and that wouldn't be so bad. But the unfortunate thing was, in this brand new house, they just lived in it for a few days, the robot vacuum started. Yeah, you know where that's going. And it went everywhere. And that's what they came home to find. Problems pop up in an instant, don't they? And we can't predict when those problems might happen. Now, that's kind of a silly one, but some of you have some much more serious issues happening in your life. Maybe you've got a health crisis, a marriage crisis. Maybe you've got a relationship crisis. And what Mary does here is actually one of the most beautiful pictures of prayer. Now, there's a fancy term that we use in the prayer movements and circles. It's called intercessory prayer. And what that means is you're praying on behalf of someone else. Mary stepped into this situation and she said, look, this isn't my problem. This isn't my embarrassment, but Jesus, you need to help them. And I think if there's something we can learn here, if I could just turn this for a minute as we think about this story teaches us so much about how we can go to God in prayer and invite him into our problems, invite him into our situations. Because that's exactly what Mary did. R.A. Torrey says this, that prayer can do anything that God can do. Isn't that beautiful to think about? That prayer can do anything that God can do. And I've had so many people tell me, Jeff, in fact, I had someone message me recently, and he said, you Christians, you pray about everything, but you never do anything. What we need is legislation. What we need is action. What we need is people to actually go out and really do something. And we have a great dialogue together. But what my friend doesn't understand is always the first and best response to any problem is to pray. That's the first and best response you can have to anything, is to pray, because prayer can do anything that God can do. And you may have asked that age-old question, Jeff, if God wants to do something, then why does he ask us to pray? It seems like a waste of time. I mean, if God's will always is done, then why does he give us this thing called prayer when he's just going to do it anyway? And I'm going to give you my very strong opinion here. Now, others would disagree, but I'm going to tell you what I really strongly believe, because I see it throughout the Bible, and I see it throughout my own life, and my experience is this, is that there are things that will only happen when we pray. And God gives us that gift. God says, I want to partner with you. I want to change this world with and through you. That God's just not off in a corner kind of doing his thing, pulling the strings. He's actually invited us into the game. He's invited us into the situation to be able to bring beautiful change to this world. And that's the gift of prayer that we have when we can enter into a situation. We can enter into a problem. When we invite Jesus into the problem, then all of a sudden we find that when we begin to pray, things begin to happen that we could never do otherwise. When things run out, when it seems like it's the end, it can just be the beginning. I was thinking about a dear woman, I think, that spoke at this church, and Wes, our founding pastors here, maybe you remember this, Marilyn Laszlo. Did she speak at this church? Right on this stage. A dear friend who's no longer on this side of eternity. She was a missionary to Papua New Guinea in the deepest jungles you could go, and I was there with her about 10 years ago. And I heard her tell a story that she was with a bunch of young men and she needed to get back. It was an emergency, and it was about a 17-hour canoe ride in this carved-out bark canoe, and they put a little outboard motor engine on the back, and they're racing up the river, and they realized they didn't have gas. And they ran out of gas, and they pulled over, and they just prayed. Now, there's a theme here. If you run out of gas, pray. And they just simply prayed and said, God, we need to get there. They cranked the motor back up, and it ran for several more hours when they knew that tank was drip dry. That's the power of God when we invite him into the problem, that he's there. And then we see how Jesus supernaturally provided. That Jesus provided in that situation. That, in fact, what Jesus brought to the table was better than what was even there. And that is the truth about God. That we have our resources, we have our natural way of doing things, and then God comes in and does the supernatural and changes the game. Because here he is at this party, and Jesus is like, well, I'm just not going to do a miracle and make it even. I'm actually going to one-up what they provided. And that actually ended up being a blessing. If you've ever watched The Chosen, which is a series that reenacts the teachings and life of Jesus, first of all, you need to watch it, but you need to watch this scene. I almost showed it, but it's a little long. But just look up this scene of when Jesus did this, and what a blessing it was to this wedding party and to the family that was so relieved from this potential moment of great shame and embarrassment in that culture to run out of wine at that moment. What Jesus did to supernaturally provide. And I'm here to say that God is a God of abundance. That God's not a God of scarcity. When you start to see the end, when you start to see the world kind of close before you and all the resources go away and you're just backed into a corner, you don't know what to do, and you think, I don't even know what to do at this moment. because there's no way we can get through this. And all of us have thought that. Maybe you're thinking that right now. There's just no way out of this. It's impossible. And it's easy in those moments for our natural responses to kick in where we say, well, I'm angry. Or I'm afraid and I just kind of implode. Or I withdraw. Or I blame. Or I try to take control in those situations. All of our natural responses rise to the surface. But here's the good news about what Jesus does is when you follow him for a while, those natural responses really start to get replaced with supernatural responses. God can change you. He can change the way you think. When you see the scarcity that's being told to us every day on our screens, in our minds, and in conversations. You know, having walked the trail of death and having thought a lot of time in my life about what happened in the mid-1800s in America, which, by the way, happened in every culture and every society throughout human history where one group dominates the other and in some way abuses another people group. When all the Native Americans were moved, I've gone back and I thought to myself, and this is one of the things that God spoke to me as I was walking a few years ago. I felt like God said, if people at that time just would have understood that there's plenty to go around. Because when we believe that there's not enough to go around, we start to become afraid. And if you know anything, fear is a liar. And fear will start to tell you things that aren't true. Fear will start to tell you that God can't do anything, that there's not enough, that you better get what you can while you can because somebody else might get it and then you'll be left out. With God, it's never a zero-sum game. It's always abundance. That doesn't mean, hey, if I give my life to God, then I get everything I want and as much as I want. That's not how it works. But God will supernaturally provide for you. If you feel like you're at the end of your rope right now, I want you to know there's hope. I sent out something on social media this week, and I said, hey, if you have a story about something that's supernatural in your life, I'd love to hear it. And I received this story from someone who's not a part of our church, but I want you to hear her story. This is what she shared with me. I really struggled with anxiety and depression in high school. It culminated when I was a junior. I made plans to end my life, not an escape, because I believed I deserved eternal separation from God, and I was going to make it come about to send myself to hell. So I made plans, and I was moments away from taking a toxic mix of meds and other things. It was a very stormy, dark day after school. My bedroom was dark, both literally and metaphorically. My parents were away. I had prepared a quick end. Right before ingesting this poison, I happened to look up, and there was a spot on the wall where the shadow of a cross appeared. Shadow isn't even the right word, as it was more the opposite. It was the light of a cross that appeared where no light should be on my wall. There was nothing in the room to cause such a thing. But it was a powerful reminder to me that Christ found me worthy to die for, that he didn't think I deserved eternal separation, that this path I was choosing cheapened his sacrifice for me. And so I threw out what I was seconds away from ingesting. Mental healing took some time, but this is what saved me. And perhaps the reminder has saved me time and time again. I'm here to tell you that if you've lost hope, that Jesus is your hope. That Jesus can supernaturally provide for you right now. Whatever problem you have, you can invite him in. And I just want to take a moment and pray for you. You might be feeling like, I'm just at the end. And God, I believe, is saying to you today, you know, the end is just the beginning. When whatever you have runs out, God has so much more in the back room waiting to bring out for you. Would you bow your heads with me? Lord, I thank you for what you've spoken to us today, the hope that we have. Father, if there's anyone here today that needs to know that hope, I pray, Lord, that they would find that through what you've spoken to them today, those here in the house, those on Daybreak Live, as we hear you together, that you would speak so loud and clear to us. Father, I thank you for what you've spoken to us today. And God, for anyone that has lost hope, I pray that you give them to him today. In Jesus' name, amen. It has been wonderful to be with you. I just want to remind you, we begin 24 hours of prayer for the next remainder of this series starting tonight at midnight. And some of you haven't signed up yet, and there's still a chance to do that. You can do that online, or as you walk out, you can take a ride into the lounge and sign up and take an hour. Listen, if this is crazy for you, if it's a stretch, if you think, there's no way I could do it, just try it. I can't wait to see what God does here at Daybreak. And as always, we have prayer partners available. Don't forget the Explorers open house after our second service day at 12:15. Get your kids involved in that incredible program. You are dismissed. Go Lions.